What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Scales 13. In today's video, we're going to be unveiling a new addition to the Scales 13 family, a happy little corn snake named Pangea. Alright guys, so to start off with, let's talk about how I actually acquired Pangea and brought her into my reptile collection. So a friend of mine at work whose significant other was moving actually wanted to get rid of the snake because the snake simply wasn't getting as much attention as it needed the past couple of months. And the family in general didn't want anything to do with the poor snake. So they both decided as a couple it was time to let the snake go. Now, of course, since I work with this person closely in my place of work, we've talked about our hobbies and different things like that. And she just knew I was into reptiles. So she asked me, hey, would you like to add a corn snake to your collection? Do you have room for a corn snake? I said, well, corn snake is a simple, small colubrid, even though it's a little bit larger than some of the other species of colubrids. And I was like, sure, why not? You know, like a corn snake is an animal that I was actually thinking about getting for a long time because they have a beautiful striking pattern to them, and they're known for having a very good temperament, although the animals are a little bit on the larger side when it comes to other members that are common colubrids kept in captivity, right? So, I went to the person's house, acquired the animal, and of course, before bringing the animal into the actual room with my collection of animals, I made sure that the animal didn't carry any parasites by taking a stool sample and taking it for an examination to the vet. And I made sure that it was quarantined in a separate room, just like I did with my Varanus xanthematicus that is right behind me within this enclosure. So after getting back the lab results, seeing that the animal didn't carry any parasites, the animal didn't have any pathogens that could harm the rest of my collection, the animal was brought into my collection now, where it is living in the same space as the rest of my reptiles. But of course, before this, I had them in a separate room, and of course, I measured the animal, and I took a look at the enclosure. So when I got the animal, it was actually in the same type of enclosure that my Portland milk snake, Phoenix, is in, which is a 20-gallon long glass tank. But the difference between Phoenix and this snake is that this snake is actually much larger than Phoenix. Phoenix is close to about 3 feet long, where if you look at my corn snake, now that I've actually had a chance to properly examine her and to get a chance to measure her fully, she's actually longer than 4 feet. So a 2 foot long glass enclosure is actually way too small for an animal of this species. Yes, snakes can curl up. Yes, they can fit into a space like that just fine. But of course, for the animal to be able to thermoregulate its body, have proper circulation, and just being able to get enough exercise instead of laying around constantly, you want the animal to be in a larger enclosure. So with that being said, my plan for Pangea is to move her to a larger enclosure in the future. What I actually want for her is a nice big vision enclosure, the vision cages, so that way she'll have enough space to completely stretch out horizontally. And if possible, if I can get something taller, I'd like to add some branches so that way she can actually do some climbing and get some more exercise from being able to have some vertical space as well. So her temperament is really nice. She's been a very friendly snake so far. Hasn't tried to bite, hasn't been defensive. So I can tell that this animal has definitely been handled and socialized by its family in the past. The animal's eyes are clear. I don't see anything wrong with the animal's vent. The scales look fine. The only thing that I notice that looks a little strange on the animal is if you look towards the upper quarter of the animal on the in the space near the neck, it seems like some of the vertebrae may have been fused together or broken at some point and didn't heal correctly. Now, of course, this can come from a multitude of different things, simply just being an enclosure that's too small, possibly a issue with the animal not being able to stretch out and develop properly, and of course, there could have been issues with the animal being malnutrition as well, even though, don't get me wrong, the animal was well fed when the animal came into my possession, which even though when an animal comes into my possession, I usually ask people to make sure the animal doesn't have a full stomach first, just so that way, if the animal's in the middle of digesting, it makes things a lot less stressful on the animal if it's moving from one place to another, that the animal is, of course, hydrated, but doesn't have a full stomach of food that needs to be digested between all the differences in the temperature changes in the environment around it from moving from one space to another. However, it made it very convenient for me when it was time to take a stool sample over to the vet, because I had one right away, so I didn't have to wait a long time for the animal to be quarantined before I got the test results back before moving it into the space with my other animals. So let's get into how the corn snake actually got its name. So a corn snake is actually called a corn snake because of that striking pattern that they have typically across their scales. So a corn snake's pattern is typically in these little squarish bands where they have these lines running down the vertical part of their body, and they have this orange coloration with this light yellow coloration. So it actually looks similar to Indian corn that you would find in the western parts of the United States. Now, where corn snakes are typically found, you'll find them on the east coast of the United States, ranging everywhere from where I grew up in South Jersey all the way down to the southern states into Florida. So as far as caring for these animals actually have very simple husbandry if you just want to keep things basic when you want to care for these animals. In captivity, they're typically fed your typical rodents, mostly mice, something that's not too large, something that they can swallow easily. But of course, in the wild, since these animals have a wide range all the way from Jersey down to Florida, of course these animals are probably eating a much wider range than the typical store-bought mice that we find in our pet shop. So of course these animals are probably taking down small lizards. The baby snakes are probably feeding on things like insects and earthworms. And of course you'll probably see them taking out things like frogs as well, if they're living in any areas where you would find small bodies of water or marshes around. These animals are typically kept on shaved aspen bedding or other types of dry bedding where they aren't given large amounts of humidity within the enclosure like some of our arboreal jungle snakes. But it is recommended to give these animals a humid hide so that way they can shed easily. Corn snakes are very popular within the pet trade. They're just as popular as Pueblo milk snakes or hognose snakes or any of the other snakes that you would find in most pet shops around the country. The awesome thing about that is these animals are typically long-lived. So as I said before, Pangea's Enclosure is not that spectacular to what my liking is for what I want for her in the future, especially since she already has an issue with some of her vertebrae. So I've decided at this point that her and my Pueblo milk snake, both of my snakes are going to be moved to vision cages very soon, where they'll have a much wider space and they'll have much more stable temperatures within their enclosure for them to live. So guys, I hope you like this small video that I made on our new addition to the reptile room, Pangea. I hope you enjoy seeing future videos of this beautiful snake as we get her into a new enclosure and we show you how we're going to move her from a 20-gallon to a much larger space, so that way she can have a better quality of life and just be a beautiful addition to the family. I hope everybody enjoyed this video. Everyone have a great day. Peace.